and out. So God calls Noah for a few different purposes here. And the first one we have, the first thing he's called to do is to build a boat. So Noah's calling is to build a boat, but not just like a boat that you just go out in the lake, right? How many here actually either have at one point or know someone who's owned a boat? So if you at least know someone or you have, and you know, it's a lot of work to take care of that boat, right? It's kind of fun to take it out for, you know, a ride, go on the lake or down a river and just kind of ride that boat. Something fun about that, right? Something fun about that. And because someone has to build that boat so it can actually function properly. This isn't a boat like that. It's not like one of these like small boats or even, you know, like a good sized boat that someone might have because they have more money. This is a massive boat. And as you know, when my wife and I went on vacation back in July, we went to the Ark Encounter. So you've been there? Oh, get ready to go. You're going to be going. Oh, you're in for a treat, let me tell you. Set a whole day aside for that. Just for that. Don't try to go to that and the Creation Museum. Just one day with the Ark Encounter. Trust me, you'll be glad you did. And by the way, if you go to the gift shop, get the coffee travel mug because it keeps it warm for a long time. Just to let you know, works really well. Anyway, what was that? Oh no, don't give me anything. It's fine. Just get it for yourself. Have a good time. But you're in for a treat because that thing is huge. That thing is massive. When you see the scope of that, you know how big they built it to the exact size specified in the Bible. They built it to that exact size, and it's this massive ship. Is there even a ship nowadays that's even close to that? I mean, it's huge. Aircraft, that's the only thing, right? An aircraft carrier, about the closest thing to that size. It's a massive boat. And he's also having to gather animals, the unclean ones 2 by 2, the clean ones in 7 pairs, but basically get them all on the boat and preserve creation too, and to preserve him and his family. So he's called to build a boat, called to help preserve creation and him and his family so God can wipe away the wicked and kind of start fresh. Start fresh with just Noah, his family, and those animals. So Noah's first calling is to build this massive boat, which had to take him a long time, right? I imagine his sons may have helped. They're likely old enough to be able to help him at this point, but still, that was a big boat. That had to take a good amount of time to build, a lot of work, but that was what he was called to do. He was called to build a boat. And he has more callings than that, though. There's actually 2 more callings we're going to cover with Noah. There's 2 more. And the second one, if you go to 2 Peter 2. 2 Peter 2. Now, when you read Genesis, it doesn't say that Noah warned people about the flood. We don't get that bit of information. All it says that God told him, like, look, I'm going to destroy everyone but your family, so build this boat, gather these animals, and just wait in there until it's all over. But we go to 2 Peter here, we find out that Noah actually had a calling to be a preacher. He had a calling to be a preacher. Did you know that? Did anyone know that? Noah was a preacher. And read in 2 Peter, in chapter 2, verse 5, it says, He did not spare the natural world when he brought the flood on its ungodly people, but protected Noah, a preacher of righteousness, and 7 others. So there you go. Noah was a preacher of righteousness. He was a preacher of righteousness. He was called to not only live a righteous life, like we're all pretty much called to do. We're all called to follow Christ, to live by the Spirit, to have that Spirit help us to lead a righteous life, a life that is pleasing to God. But he was also called to preach that to others, to preach righteousness to others. And as we can tell from how things went, people didn't, right? And the same thing nowadays, some people listen, some don't. You can't make them listen to you. You can't force them to. So some people listen to you, some won't. And same thing happened to Noah. He was called to preach righteousness, and the rest of the world turned a deaf ear, to the point where God's like, okay, I'm going to destroy everyone. Noah, build this boat for me, please, and just put your family and animals in it, and we're starting over. But he wasn't an ineffective preacher of righteousness. In fact, he did reach some people, didn't he? In fact, he reached 7 others. His family. He was able to reach his family. And I got a chance to watch an interesting movie. In fact, Tom Batt gave me a movie to watch that several months later I finally found time to watch it. After he kept asking me, have you watched the movie yet? Like, I will. One day. I promise you. Well, I will watch it. So last Monday I watched this movie finally. And it's called Monumental. It has Kirk Cameron in it, and it talks about how America's going, in a terrible direction, and there's all kinds of opinions on it, as opposed to, well, it's just the way it's going, the world's going to burn anyway, so just might as well let it burn. And he's kind of like, no, we need to be doing something. I have children in this world. I'd like to help them as well. And there's a lot of cool stuff in this movie. If you have a chance to look it up, to watch it, I encourage you. But what it all boils down to, if you were to take that whole movie and boil it down to one simple thing, and it would be to teach your children, teach your family about what it means to follow God, about what it means to live a righteous life. And that's what Noah did. He taught his family. He was a preacher of righteousness that, unfortunately, the world was so corrupt and their hearts were so wicked that they were not reached, but his family was. And so his family was spared. In fact, now his family were the ones to survive the flood and start the human race all over again. All because Noah, who was called to preach righteousness, was able to, at the very least, reach his family. So there we have Noah's second calling, to be a preacher of righteousness. And his third calling we're going to look at today is in Hebrews. As I told people, yesterday in the Saturday service, I'm going to refrain from making any coffee jokes about Hebrews. It's completely refrain from that. Which is kind of funny because I kind of just did make the joke, but I'm going to refrain. I promise. No jokes about coffee. But Hebrews 11:7, Hebrews chapter 11 really talks about a lot of people who were called to have one very important thing, one thing that we are called to have. But it talks about people who had a great amount of this. And that is faith. In Hebrews 11:7 it reads, "By faith Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear built an ark to save his family. By his faith he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness that is in keeping with faith." So here we have Noah's third calling that we're going to look at, and that's he was called to have faith, and not just some faith, not just a little tiny bit of faith, be like, yeah, okay, I believe in God, I have faith in God. No, he was called to have an extreme amount of faith. Remember I was talking about building that boat and the scale of this boat, how large it is? If you have a chance to go see it, I encourage you to go to the Ark Encounter if you ever have that opportunity, just to see the scope of it and go inside of it and see how big it is on the inside. Think about Noah and possibly his son. Like I said, we don't know if his sons helped him, but likely that his sons were helping him build this massive ship, massive boat. He is told by God that a flood is going to come, a worldwide flood is coming to wipe out all of mankind except for him and his family. There has been no worldwide flood before this point. And there's never been a worldwide flood after this point either. But he's told, look, this flood is going to come. And he has to take it on faith to undergo building this massive ship. And nowadays, of course, you mentioned aircraft carriers, probably the closest thing we have in size. But there's usually like several people building this thing over, and it still takes a long period of time to fully construct an aircraft carrier. Imagine Noah, and probably at the most his 3 sons, building this big boat. Imagine how long that took. Imagine people around who may have seen this thing, because again, it was pretty huge, it was kind of hard to miss. Imagine people seeing this thing and what they thought. Imagine that. The amount of faith he had to have in order to just undertake this, and even to convince his family. Because how many of you have like that, a crazy relative or crazy friend that tells you these huge stories, and you're kind of like, you listen to it and you don't really believe it because they're kind of full of it, they're just making things up. They tend to tell these big tales or some kind of thing they did that they got to go to and experience that you're like, that seems like a little far-fetched. Like they always have these huge tales, and you're like, just like, okay, they have these things they say. You just kind of listen to it. You don't always believe it. You're just like, that's just crazy Uncle Joe right there. Or, that's just my crazy friend always making up these stories. He probably hasn't done all the things he said. He or she, it could be either one. So just imagine Noah telling his family, not just Noah having this great faith, but he was also an example of faith to his family. He went and told his family, like, okay, look, family, here's the deal. God sees how wicked the world is, so he wants me to build a giant boat, gather all these animals, and wait for this flood to come. And imagine Noah's family hearing this. Imagine crazy Uncle Joe saying, something like this, and you're like, oh, this crazy family was saved once this flood came, once God wiped out all of the wicked. So Noah was called to have great faith, so much that he was an example of faith for other people. So here's the